Aloha. Good morning, or good afternoon almost. So for those of you that were here yesterday, Bina Choi did an intro for Dr. Manalani Meyer. So it's not going to, where she confessed to be a stalker. And anyway, it was maybe far too many details than, so I won't be, this is not that kind of intro, but I do want to just say that Brandy we're colleagues together. We actually work out of the American Studies Department in the University of Hawaii at Manoa, which is a little bizarre. People are always thinking, what are you doing at American Studies? And I think, what Brandy Nālani McDougall, Professor McDougall does is her specialty is in indigenous studies and is really looking at empire, looking at critiques, looking at the ways that that indigeneity persists despite the histories and contemporary realities that we face. She is an incredibly accomplished poet. She has published two works, the author of two poetry collections, The Salt Wind, Kamakani Pa'akai, and more recently, Aina Hanau, Birthland. And she hails from A'apueo in Kula, Maui. She's also a Ford and Mellon Hawaii Fellow, and she is the author of an award-winning monograph called Finding Meaning, Kauna and Contemporary Hawaiian Literature. She's also the director of the Manoa Center for Humanities and Civic Engagement, and most importantly, she is one of our HT25 artists, but she's also the Hawai'i Poet Laureate for 2023 to 2025. And and she's a mother and an advocate and an ally, and she's so present. She shows up for everyone, everywhere, despite so many responsibilities that she juggles. She's precious. And I have the honor of introducing Brandy Nālani McDougall.
Mahalo nui, Noel. Mahalo nui to all of you for being here today. Okay. So, aloha mai nā akua, nā kūpuna, maka mai, nā mamo o haloa, nā aloha aina, nā kāko'o, nā aloha aina, nā hoa pakipika, aloha mai kākou. O Brandy Nālani McDougall, au nui ke aloha no ku'u aina hanau o A'apueo ma Haleakala Maui, nui ke aloha no Kalai Pohaku o Ahu, a lua ku'u aina noho. He kumu ma UH Manoa, ma ka oihana na ha'awina Amelika, a ka ko'u mau papa no na ha'awina indigenous, or ai ole o iwi. He mea no'o mo'olelo hakumele, he mea pa'i puke, he makua hine au. Hana no hoi au e kuka me oko i kia la. Mahalo a piha e wasan a Al Kudairi, Bina Choi, Noel Kahanu, Rosina Potter, Josh Tengan, Manakali, and everyone at Hawaii Contemporary and the coordinators of Art Summit, Mahalo Ya'oko, Brandy Nālani McDougall, originally from A'apueo on Maui, but now living in Kalai Pohaku, Oahu, with my keiki. Aloha nui to these aina. As you heard from Noel's awesome introduction, I'm a professor of American Studies specializing in Indigenous Studies at UH Manoa. I'm also a literary scholar and a poet, an editor, and a mother. Honored to be here with all of you, and special mahalo to Wasan, Bina, Noel, Rosina, Josh, Monica, and everyone at Hawaii Contemporary, and all the coordinators for this summit. And mahalo again to all of you for being here. So I wanted to start off my talk today. So my talk is called Aloha Ka'opuni, which also happens to be what I've chosen to be the inspiration for the project of poems, the series of poems I'll be working on as part of the Hawai'i Triennial 2025. So by now, many of us in this room are familiar, perhaps, with Haunani K. Trask's famous declaration during her 1993 speech at Iolani Palace for the centennial of the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom, in which she said, "We are not American. We are not American. We are not American." At the time when she gave this speech, I was in high school and home on Maui when I heard her words on the news. Despite Joe Moore's demonization of her, and I can't believe he's still a newscaster, so you can imagine, her words cracked through what I felt, what I now believe to have been like the colonial spell I had been under at the time. And this spell included the experience of living amidst so much contradiction as an Oiwi person under a somewhat invisibilized American occupation of Hawaii at the time. And I say invisibilized because at that point in time, I had been completely immersed in American culture, accepting small moments of Hawaiianness, including, kupuna visits to my elementary school classroom. At the time, I was even at Kamehameha, and despite that being a school specifically serving Hawaiian children, those moments of Hawaiianness were also somewhat rare. And I was just beginning to learn about our history as a lahui, it being a sovereign nation and a people before U.S. empire's illegitimate annexation. It was a cultural and spiritual awakening for me, and of course a political one too. Years later, I could hardly believe that I had the opportunity to take classes from Haunani K. Trask and learn from her directly. And I really deeply miss her as my kumu. So recognizing Hawaii as a country, as a lahui, means that you must also recognize the pilina, the relationships we once and have continued to nurture within the world, with other countries and other peoples, and the ways in which our kupuna, the ancestors of our pai'aina and voyagers of Oceania, are much more than ghosts. Rather, they live on in every single one of us. They infuse and infiltrate every system that surrounds us. They shift and revolutionize our paradigms, and they inform and shape our creative impulses. In thinking of Hawaii as a lahui, and for my project for HT25, I finally decided upon Aloha Ka'opuni, or what I'm translating as revolutionary aloha. I'm drawing from the word ka'apuni, which means to make a tour, go around, surround, encircle, rotate, revolve, travel. It also can mean to circuit or to move in a circuitous fashion, revolution, and revolving. Okay, so it's all about movement and circling. Okay. Ka'apuni also happens to be a hula step that has been called around the island, and I will spare you from me demonstrating that today, but you'll be able to see it quite readily. Watching any Merry Monarch competition or any hula competition for that matter, any hula you'd be able to see that hula step featured. But it's basically when the dancer pivots on the ball of one foot in a complete circle, and the other foot takes 4 or more steps to turn completely around into a circuit. So at this stage, I'm interested in exploring ka'apuni for its historical resonance, as in Kalakaua's ka'apuni honua, his diplomatic trip as our sovereign around the world, and all of the mo'olelo, the many mo'olelo that come from our kupuna about different akua or different ali'i traveling around each of the islands, and the knowledge that comes from what it means to travel around, to speak to people in different communities, to make connections with all of those communities as well. Okay. So I think it's a part of learning about and understanding Aina and Aina E, so distant lands, through a Hawaiian lens. I would also like to incorporate the idea of Hawaii and Aina Hanau, or birthland and country, and Aloha being carried by and traveling with these amazing people like Kalakaua, Lili'uokalani, Kai'ulani, and other Kanaka Oiwi travelers that continue to this day. What does it mean that we carry Hawaii with us? Yeah? And what does it mean that then that Hawaii is what we use to relate to other people? And that aloha is always infused with it. I would also like to kind of explore what ka'apuni, and this is kind of the nerd poet in me, also kind of like the nerd literary scholar in me, where I'm really interested in thinking about like what would that look like in terms of form, like a poetic form, to think about like how would I, like I just described to you what that hula step is, what would be like a poetic equivalent of that, like, and how would I show that on the page, you know? And so I'm thinking through all of these things, like, you know, how to render it visually on the page, but also like what would it mean to kind of speak in circles, to speak in a circuitous fashion without boring people, of course, you know. But like, how can I bring that in aesthetically? Okay, and so in thinking through that, I envision creating a series of poems that weave also the historical and the present and the future. So what is happening, has happened, will happen. And then also thinking through the ways in which circling and revolving and revolution are really central to the ways in which we have to think about movements, right? So whether it's social movements, environmental, decolonial justice movements, disability justice movements, how important it is for us to approach those movements with a sense of revolution and concentricity, right? So, yeah, these are all things I'm trying to think through as I write this. And of course, I haven't written the actual poems yet. I'm still in the research phase now. So what I am going to share today, though, as part of the poetic evocation, are some of the poems that I have started writing that maybe show sort of the earliest thinking through these ideas. So poems I've already written where maybe like there's a little ano, a little seed in there that I think I can water and then spring forth new poems that would fit within this vision. But returning to Haunani K. Trask's words of "We are not American" and thinking of Hawaii as a country, as a lahui, I had the honor of working with 4 other Kanaka Oiwi editors. I mean, we actually still are working together. I shouldn't say that in the past tense. Maile Arvin, Hi'ile Hobart, Kamauli Kuwata, and Lani Tevis. And we're working on a special issue of the American Quarterly, which will be out in September. I'm doing a plug for it right now, in case that's not obvious. And it's entitled, "We Are Not American Still." And this is quite a revolutionary thing to have that title be part of a journal that has been really dedicated to trying to understand American empire in general, even though that's not what American studies started out as. American studies did start out as what I think most people think American studies sounds like it should be, which is kind of a celebration of Americanness, right? And what that means. Like there's an inherent patriotism within the field in its beginnings. And it, of course, left out so many other concentric fields of study that have since infused it to then have the field become one that's focused on understanding the history and the maintenance of American empire, okay? And so, but there has not yet been an issue, a special issue just kind of focused entirely on what does it mean to look at a place and a people who are occupied by the United States, who have viable and important claims against being American, and who openly share, you know, as happens here in Hawaii, that we are not American at the same time, right? So what does that mean? And so I'm proud to say that that's going to come out in September, so be on the lookout for it. It'll also feature poetry and visual art. So just to speak to folks that you probably, or exhibitions here also, it'll feature some work by Kapulani Landgraf, some from Aloha, of course, which was also inspired by Haunani K. Trask's words, "We are not American." And then also images from her first collection as well. And then several poems by various poets who are also really inspired by that theme too. And I'm gonna share some of those poems today. So, okay. I just wanted to quote from the introduction to our special issue before I kind of go further into some of the poems I'll share today. Those that I'm inspired by, who've been written by other people, and then some of my own. So in our introduction to that special issue, we write, "We have come to see our one hanau, our homeland, as unexceptional in its struggles. Apprehending racial politics, climate crisis, colonial occupation, and economic inequity at home necessarily requires that we understand what we share with communities in places like Puerto Rico, Palestine, Okinawa, and New Orleans. In this thinking, we follow the ideas set out by Trask and others who insisted on a vision of liberation bound up with others." Okay. And so a big part of what we're hoping to kind of generate a discussion on through the issue is not simply that Hawaii should not be considered a part of the United States, but what are the possibilities? What is the potential of that lies within that as well? Okay, so in saying, it's not only naming what we are not, but also leaving some possibility for what we are instead. Okay, and what relations can we claim beyond the national boundaries that have been set upon us through that. So I think we must always think in these kinds of outward circular motions, even as we draw them inward. Okay, so what revolutions of struggle, resistance, and peace are possible when we look outward and inward at the same time? When we think of circles of countries, of communities, of ecologies, of human and more than human languages as concentric and both centripetal and centrifugal. I'm still, as I mentioned, in the research stage of all of this, so I have my work cut out for me. But like I said, I do have some poetry to share that have been part of my own inner journey, laying the groundwork for thinking through this. So Part of today's poetic evocation, I'm sharing my own work along with our poetry community's work that has been part of this Aloha Ka'apuni for generations now. So I'm going to start with a poem, a very famous poem that traces our very beginnings, King Kalaka's version of the first va of the Kumulipo, and Queen Liliuokalani's translation of it into English. O ke au I kahuli vela ka honua, o ke au I kahuli lole kalani, o ke au I kuka I aka kala, e ho'o mā lama lama I ka mā lama, o ke au o makali'i ka po, o ka vale vale ho'o kumu honua ia, o ke kumu o ka lipo I lipo ai, o ke kumu o ka po I po ai, o ka lipo lipo, o ka lipo lipo, o ka lipo ka la, o ka lipo ka po vali ho'i, hānau ka po. At the time that turned the heat of the earth, at the time when the heavens turned and changed, at the time when the light of the sun was subdued to cause light to break forth, at the time of the night of Makali'i, then began the slime which established the earth, the source of deepest darkness, of the depth of darkness, of the depth of darkness, of the darkness of the sun in the depth of night. It is night, so was night born. That poem has inspired many, many poems of my own, not least of which is this one that I'm going to share with you. And I think when, just sort of knowing our history and knowing its depths, knowing the vision of darkness that our kupuna could see kind of behind us, and then looking at like how we relate to it in the present, through the kumulipo, has been so inspiring. And so, of course, thinking about American colonialism here in Hawaii, it's really just a tiny blip, a tiny little moment in that grand narrative of time. Okay, so it inspired this poem, Star Spangled Banner. A betrayal to stand with your hand over your heart and sing the song of the country occupying your country. To read every star on the flag above your country's flag and see the last one there, small, white, and pointed, stitched into the blue with a thin thread, as if it has always been that way, as if it can never be undone. Mahalo. Mahalo. So this is this next poem is called American Poem. And I should preface it by saying it's a pretty cheeky American poem. Okay. This is my American poem, starving and helpless in an unknown land, searching for religious freedom, vulnerable to the kindnesses of violent savages. This is my American poem, calculating how to fill the ship with chained Africans lying horizontal and stacked to the ceiling of the lower decks while minimizing human wastage. This is my American poem built on the bones of natives and African slaves, of indentured and otherwise exploited Asian, Latinx, and Pacific Islander laborers, saving some for museum exhibits. This is my American poem speaking of freedom and freely speaking, yet rarely saying anything to set land and people free. This is my American poem sucking the earth's metals, minerals, and oil through a straw longer and older than Keystone XL, or DAPL, or Line 3, or Line 5. This is my American poem paying the police to crack down violently on protectors while paying politicians to fine them for obstruction. This is my American poem fracking the sand, the soil for ounces of black petroleum and placing fuel tanks by aquifers, contaminating gallons of potable water. This is my American poem drilling for oil in the Arctic refuge, then uploading videos to YouTube of the last glaciers calving, hoping it will go viral. This is my American poem taking refuge in an embassy, thankful for military bases in hostile territory, testing sites in Indian country, in Alaska, in the Atlantic, in the Pacific. This is my American poem dropping bombs on islands, dropping guns for puppet governments, dropping cans of carcinogenic meats for war-torn or climate change refugees. This is my American poem screaming that we should take care of our own before helping others. This is my American poem holding title to a continent, to islands, to oceans, patenting genetic modifications to own and profit from all that grows green. This is my American poem developing and selling houses built on toxic dump sites, piping water poisoned to acceptable levels. This is my American poem ravenous and desperate for its next frontier, plagued with acid reflux and irritable bowel syndrome after all it has eaten. This is my American poem speaking before millions in an expensive Italian suit, hoping its comb-over won't lift off its scalp unexpectedly. This is my American poem, tired after spending money to save money, after brawling over bargains on Black Friday, which started last Thursday. This is my American poem using excessive violence, shooting children in hoodies and beating Black relatives to death in custody, giving itself reasonable cause. This is my American poem securing the perimeter of the electric fence, ready to shoot anyone the searchlight touches. This is my American poem separating children from their families, putting them in cages only to deny them asylum. This is my American poem taking away the constitutional right to abortion and forcing all birthing bodies to bring any pregnancy to term, no matter the mental, physical, or financial costs. This is my American poem forgetting where it came from, losing its songs, its stories, its languages, clearing its plants and animals, breaking its promises. This is my American poem imagining its only end, coming post-apocalyptic solar flare, zombie epidemic, climate change catastrophe, or alien invasion, but even then believing it will live on as the best poem ever written. So Hanonike Trask was also just an amazing poet. And these are some lines from a poem she calls An Agony of Place. Our love suffers with a heritage of beauty, where our people go blindly, servants of another race, a culture of machines, grinding vision from the eye, thought from the hand, until a tight silence descends wildly in place. Yeah. It's our agony of place. Just a few lines. It's beautiful. But so much of her work also really inspired my own, of course, whether it's her scholarship, but also most definitely her poetry. I wrote a poem called Second Gift that was for her, to honor her, just as she graduated, just as she retired from teaching at UH Manoa. So this is Second Gift, and it's for Haunani. I'm quite fond of epigraphs, especially when I'm quoting from people much smarter than I, such as Haunani Trask and Malcolm X, and so many other revolutionaries that she incorporated into her courses that I got to learn from her about. Can you imagine? I feel like I make a lot of people jealous when I say I took a class on revolutionaries with Haunani Trask. Yeah, it was really amazing. But this is my way of maybe sharing some of that ike, some of that wisdom with all of you too. So there's a few epigraphs that start each section, and I'm just going to read a couple of sections for you here. Okay, so this is the second gift for Haunani, and the title comes from something she wrote. The first gift of Western civilization was disease. The second gift of Western civilization was violence. The first section starts with this epigraph from Malcolm X, who Haunani was a huge fan of. I have no mercy or compassion in me for a society that will crush people and then penalize them for not being able to stand up under the weight. For over 4 generations, they have said we are a people with a history of violence, accustomed to the dark, cold cell, remedial in mind and body. They write of how we killed infants, sacrificed humans, practiced incest, how our kings and queens were alcoholic, inept dictators, how we own slaves, how disease comes with darkness, how they must save us from ourselves. And we take the new tongue and its historical revisions, the low test scores, the longer sentences, the water shortages, the paid-off politicians, the third part-time job, the cancers and the radiation, diabetes and the amputations, eminent domain and adverse possession, the overruling of all our objections, because now their violence is all we know. We are not American. We are not American. We are not American. Haunani K. Trask. Violence is more than lodging bullets into brown or black bodies, but also burning sacred valleys, stabbing tunnels into mountains, damming streams, building telescopes on our Mauna, dumping poisons into oceans, overdeveloping Aina, bombing and buying islands. Violence is Arizona jail cells, GMOs, and unearthed EV waiting under a Walmart ramp, in boxes, in museums, in a church basement. Violence is what we settle for because we've been led to believe green paper can feed us more than green land. Violence is what we're used to as they measure our blood to wait decades for $1 a year lease, when we forget how we once fed and healed ourselves, how our mouths hold life and death. We are no longer shocked by raids on what is left in the pitched tents and tarps, our evictions from beach to beach and park to park, the poverty of unfurling fists open only to the smallest of handouts. Violence is believing you are in the United States, driving on a highway built over the sacred, carrying artillery to scorch the sacred, so more sacred lands can become the United States through violence. It always seems impossible until it's done. Nelson Mandela. You tell us, you are not a racist because you fight racism. You are a warrior, and you train more warriors. Show us how to sharpen and land words like spears, how to catch their spears and hurl them back. You call us the spears of our nation and assure us decolonization is all around us. You guide us to the rope of resistance so we can weave the newest strands together under a sovereign sun. And so we tell our children tell their children, and their children tell their children, until our words become the chattering winds of hope that erode the hardness of violence from the earth. And we are sown back into and born from Papa Hanau Moku, green and tender once again. Mahalo. So I had the opportunity to read with a poet, a Samoan poet and performer, Will Giles, and his ancestors from Samoa, from American-occupied Samoa. And he kindly shared, I asked him to share this poem with me of his that he performed. And I think it's part of, again, those concentric circles. So Will grew up in Hawaii, but was always, thinking about home, thinking about his ancestors, and thinking about the ways in which Samoa and other places within the Pacific relate to us here in Hawaii, of course, right? Of course. So these are a few lines from his poem called Captain America. Oh, I should preface it by sharing that one of the really just amazing, beautiful things that he's doing in this poem is questioning Captain America's shield. So the choice of Captain America's weapon being a shield, and then thinking through what U.S. militarization does in terms of which communities are used as part of its shield, right? Who gets put on the front lines, who gets recruited. And then, of course, that's something we know really intimately throughout the Pacific. So this is from Will's amazing poem. When I see that shield, I remember that one of every 8 adult natives in Guam is a U.S. veteran, that American Samoa has the top Army recruiting station in the country, that Polynesian Islanders have the highest casualty rates in our armed forces. We are dying to belong. And I am beginning to understand the metaphor of Captain America's weapon. So tell me how a man builds a human shield, fills a military with the children of nations it has stolen. Our federal government spends over 8 times as much on warfare than it does on education. Then we wait as failing schools spit our kids out, unserved. Wait until the opportunities we dreamed of seem farther away than the stars our people once used as maps. Yeah. Beauty, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, that one definitely hits. And you can check out, he has a performance of it, a really amazing performance of the poem in its entirety on YouTube. So definitely check it out. Will Giles, Captain America. Okay. Also wanted to share this poem by, or part of this poem by Donovan Kuhio Collips. And this is from his poem called We Are Not Long to Aloha Aina. And I wanted to share it because, of course, one of the things that we're thinking about is, when we think about U.S. militarization and how it's been an intimate and integral part of our colonialism in the Pacific, are the ways in which not only are our people militarized, but our lands are militarized. The lands of the world end up becoming militarized and destroyed, devastated. The U.S. military is one of the leading polluters of the world in terms of dumping toxic everything, toxic poisons in our ocean, or on our lands, of course, through ongoing testing. There's a tendency to have testing sites be located on indigenous lands within the United States. So all of our communities are viewed as smaller populations that aren't able to have a strong stay in stopping that desecration and devastation as well. And we end up paying the price for that in terms of our waters being rendered toxic and polluted and poisoned for us too. So this is Donovan Kuhio Collips from a poem he wrote, We Have Not Long to Aloha Aina. And though his focus is less on militarization and more on climate change, right? I think it's something that's really urgent for us to think about, like the devastation that comes with colonialism, with colonial systems, with militarization systems, right? And how we're in a really fragile point in time right now as human beings where we need to figure out better ways, right, of living with each other and living with the earth. This is Donovan Kuhio Collips. We have not long to distinguish the unnecessary that clings to our bodies from the way the uala vines should. Let our children fall to their knees praying for thanks instead of barges. What more can we ask for than to be embraced by leaves the shape of hearts, a dream of full bellies in the shade? We have not long before our bodies cannot aloha aina, when mama finds us finally, a life lived not knowing how much she loves you. Even the days know that cost as her hands reach for you again and again, always, as the fires burn and the sea swallows. Okay, so moving toward, I guess, sort of winding toward the end, and I bet you can already kind of guess I've been giving you like a little medley of poems here and there. I hope it's okay that I'm doing that. I wanted to really share just the vibrance and beauty of our community here, of our poetic community, and the ways in which we really work to foster a sense of community, not just within Hawaii, but also kind of rippling outward as well. And so I'm going to share, I think I have time. Yeah, okay. I know I want to be mindful of not taking up too much. Okay, so I wanted to read this poem of mine, and it's called Ku Piki Piki o Oahu, and it's actually, I'm really honored that it's in the Aloha No Art Summit reader, so you can also read it there. Okay. This was a poem that I wrote as part of the Shangri-La 8x8 exhibition when they first offered it in 2020. So Ku Piki Piki O, for those of you that don't know, because that's the original Inoa Aina for what's now called Black Point, pretty exclusive area here on Oahu. So Ku Piki Piki O. Stand here on the scarred edge of this island, where Robert Wilcox and Samuel Nolane would have stood in 1895, fighting to protect Hawaii from white annexationists backed by the American military. Here, where Hawaii was annexed without a treaty and in violation of international law in 1898, stand at the jagged edge of 1916 when Americans drilled and cracked the reef and bombed coastal cliffs to build battery after battery for seacoast guns, reinforced magazines for munitions, and command bunkers before decommissioning them all. Here, where in 1933 Americans outfitted a new battery with railway guns and another magazine before also decommissioning it. Stand here at the manicured edge of a Black Point estate where a tobacco heiress, once known as the richest girl in the world, built one of her mansions in 1937, ornamenting her walls and floors and courtyard with the art, jewels, and prayers of Muslim people whose countries, whose homes, families, lands, and treasures are bombed and shot by Americans who bomb and burn and shoot Hawaii to train before leaving for combat. Stand here at the top of Black Point, one of the most exclusive places to live in Hawaii. Stand outside the outer gate so you can understand that you don't belong in any of these 75 lavish houses. You have to imagine getting past that gate and standing outside another, the inner gate, the one that opens only for those living in the 8 exclusive estates on Royal Circle, named, as realtors say, because only the highest of the Hawaiian chiefs on Oahu once lived there. You can only stand at the secured edge of that land by the guard post alone, since you'll never have the financial portfolio to go in with a global luxury realtor to tour the oceanfront estate once owned by the original Magnum PI, Tom Selleck. who now sells kupuna reverse mortgages, listed for $23 million, or the Bali-inspired villa for $14.8 million. You strain, but you can't see where those Americans stand safely on their cliffside koa decks over the buried batteries of war, watching the distant waves rise and break. Stand here at the breaking edge of Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan as the American military invades and raids their oil fields, as the U.S. chooses their leaders and builds Middle Eastern bases. Stand here as U.S.-backed regimes fall once U.S. troops leave, as Afghan families flee to crowded plains, closed borders. Stand at the sharp edge of Raqqa, Syria, where 300,000 people once lived, where the U.S. dropped 10,000 bombs and destroyed 80% of the city through airstrikes alone. Stand here at the receding edge of Palestine, as Israel fires U.S. weapons to steal family homes, whole communities, to build military outposts, then Israeli settlements. Stand here on stolen land at the edge of fences, checkpoints, and guard posts. Stand where international law is broken without consequences. Stand at the edge of hotels and mansions, military golf courses over ancestral graves, adverse possession and deeds from British or French mandate, Israeli or American settlement and military base, from overthrow and annexation, from population transfer, from refugees in exile left to wander the ruins hungry. Stand here at the edge of return to our people whose blood and flesh and bone and hair, whose roots and seeds have been ground into the mud, the sand held in black basalt. We, the Mauna, Moana, Aina, Ikena, Jabal, Muhit, Erd, Amarifa, stand beside us where we breathe life into ashes and become Simorg, Alai, where we return from flight, from bomb and blood, from char and exile, where we return as rain and salt, as eroding winds, as these waves, as olive groves and orange trees growing wild as vines of Maile. Stand with us where our lands are returned, and we return to them. But first, stand at the edge of truth. This is not the United States. This is not a Christian state. This is not the land of the free. This is not a papal bull. This is not a U.S.-backed regime. This is Hawaii, Kaho'olawe, Pohakuloa, Makua, Kapu Kaki. This is Guahan, the Texan. This is Samoa. This is Puerto Rico, Vieques. This is the Marianas, Pagan. This is the Marshall Islands, Bikini, Aniwitak, Rangalap. This is the Federated States of Micronesia. This is Palau. This is Turtle Island. This is Indian country. This is Palestine. This is Afghanistan. It is Iraq. It is Iran. It is Syria. This is Okinawa. This is South Korea, Jeju. This is not paradise, not virgin land, not real estate, not wasteland, not your sacrifice or war zone, not your American lake or wake, not your Pacific pivot, not your RIMPAC ocean, not your vacation. This is stolen land and ocean. This is ancestor and descendant. This is not Diamond Head. This is Le'ahi. This is not Black Point. This is Ku Piki Piki O. Stand here. Stand here. Mahalo. Couple more poems. How are you guys doing out there? Okay. All right. This is a poem, or this is from a poem by Punahele, who also was an artist for Shangri-La's 8x8 exhibition. And you can also find an amazing video of him performing this poem on their website, so check it out. This is called The Return. And these are, again, just a few lines from it. And I wish I could rap like Punahele, but I'm just a nerdy page poet. So yeah, this is from Punahele. Our intentions shine when we work to right the wrongs. Our stories will be told when the wind sings songs. At the beginning and the end, the Aina has the throne. My people come from the Lepo. This will always be our home. To do the right thing is to give the land back. The right thing to do is to return stolen artifacts. If you do good, then good will come back. The moral of the story is you are what you attract. Yeah. And this is No'u Revila. I think right about now we need to learn how to do this. This is a poem called How to Swallow a Colonizer. How to Swallow a Colonizer. And yeah. Number 1, brindle your throat. Number 2, metabolize the twitching eyes, tongue, and feet. Number 3, hold your stomach with both hands while his teeth dissolve and recite, you will be undarkened, you will be undarkened, this acid medicine. Number 4, always rub your pico. When the settler breaks down, stick your finger in your mouth to beckon flowers. Number 5, kaulana nā pua. Mahalo. So I love that closing image that No'u Revila leaves us with, of the beauty that can be alchemized from colonial destruction and pain, when we can widen our circles and see them as revolving and revolutionary, as concentrically linked with others. I'll return back to the first poem I read, the first va of the Kumulipo, to share that the great lesson of that 2,100 line genealogical oli in its entirety, as Dr. Pualani Kanakaʻole Kanahele shares, is one of interdependence. I extend that lesson of interdependence beyond our own precious and fragile ecosystems here to the human and non-human ecosystems of our entire planet, and to those of Sudan, Congo, West Papua, and Palestine, and so many other people struggling to remain amidst the most horrible atrocities of genocide. Their struggle and devastation, as well as their liberation, is bound with our own. I will close with this poem that I wrote for the great Palestinian poet Rafat al-Arir. It's also the most recent poem I've written. It's been quite hard to recover from. So I'm hoping that this actual presentation, this poetic evocation I'm sharing with all of you, helps kind of spur me into writing more soon. But this was the poem I think that has been difficult for me to recover from as part of it. So it's my honor to share it with you today. I use several lines from his poems. First, because they're amazing and beautiful, of course. And so, yeah, so moving. But also because I think as poets and as part of a worldwide community of poets, it becomes part of our kuleana, part of our responsibility to recognize that we are all connected to each other and to amplify each other's words as well. So it starts off with an epigraph from one of his poems. I should say, this poem is called We Live, We Live, dedicated to Rafat al-Arir, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike around the time of my 47th birthday. And since then, one of his eldest daughter and her child, his first grandchild, was also killed. Also an Israeli airstrike. Okay. So this is an epigraph from one of his poems. We dream and pray, clinging to life even harder, every time a dear one's life is forcibly rooted up. We live, we do. You were killed yesterday on December 6th, but it was today, the 7th, my birthday, son of Shujaya, when I got the news that you were killed by Israel airstrike while visiting your brother's home in Gaza City. 83 years ago today, my grandfather, only 12 years old at the time, climbed onto the roof of his boarding school dormitory in Honolulu to watch the bombs fall on the U.S. base built on Pu'uloa, and thought he would die that day. Just yesterday, you, your brother, your sister, and 4 of her children were killed. You were only a few years younger than me. This morning, a day after Israel's birds of death screeched down toward you, my children woke up on their own in Honolulu. Though it was still dark, their breath like soil, their voices like soil, their kisses like soil, blinking when touched by rain. And my youngest, rubbing her eyes, asked if it was my birthday. And am I now 47? Before singing in our ancestors' language that we are learning to speak together after the wreckage of English and Americans. And my oldest, who is learning to speak in speech therapy, giggled in her grogginess, then sang her own song too. And what did I do to deserve such tenderness this early morning, or to live this long, having heard bombs and guns fired only from a distance, having stood safely scared as a child, angry as an adult, at the sound of our lands and waters, Kaho'olave, Pohakuloa, Makua, Wahiwa, Mililani, battered, bruised, burned, poisoned in live fire practice, by bombs that may have fallen on you or close to you, on those you loved, full-hearted, recklessly, those you learned to cling to even harder, bombs that may have hurt or killed children like mine, who could still sing. And you, what did you do to deserve your shorter poet's life except tell the truth and sow the seeds of songs in your students, except grow your love for them, for your people, for your land and country, for the promise within the wreckage that is this English, echoing all the way here to Honolulu, where I resisted opening my TikTok feed to savor my children's sleepy sweetness just a little longer before facing that birthdays are death days too. That each day, bombs in schools, hospitals, and houses fall. Each day, children are pulled from rubble. Children are pulled away crying from rubble that buried their mothers, that they feel alone, that their hurt seeps down into the dirt as they look heaven in the eye somewhere in Gaza, that they have written their names and their parents' names on their limbs so their bodies, or maybe just these parts, if that is all that's left, can be known to anyone who finds them. That if you must die, so easily uprooted from the earth, so harshly unsung, let it be a tale And why not write poems to birth the strongest words of love, like rocks, like seeds, like songs, like names? And why not hold those rocks in your hands, your arms, pull them close to your chest like children lighting the darkest of birthday mornings? Why not feel their full weight and cling even harder to live, dear poet of Shujaya, of Gaza, of Palestine, just before you take flight. Mahalo. Mahalo nui. Yeah. I don't know if there's time for, there's a little time for Q&A if anyone has anything they want to discuss or ask. I'm here. Mahalo nui again for joining today. Yeah. Mahalo. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah, or anything? It's always awkward to transition to questions, isn't it? I understand. Don't worry. But maybe I could sweeten the deal. I have whoever asks the first question, I can give them a book. Actually, I have books for maybe the first two people. Yeah, this new book. Oh, okay. Oh, right on. Yay! You guys got a Junkin Po though to like. it looked kind of even. I missed it. Mahalo. Aloha. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, mahalo. Everyone. Rosanna Raymond, too. Amazing artist. Mahalo, and so honored. Yes. And as I'm sure you know, like you really do have to care for yourself in that process, right? There's a way in which I think as an artist, right, you have to make yourself very vulnerable to a certain extent to feeling, right? To feeling everything and to taking it in. And especially when you want to write about something you feel is so wrong in the world, right? When you want to speak to that and when you want to show and put your own people's struggles in conversation, in dialogue, in that concentric circling, with other people's struggles, right? And I think part of the horror of the genocide in Palestine is also that it's still happening, and it's still we are still these just so much horror surrounds us, right? And we ourselves feel powerless to do something with it, right? Or to do something to fight against it. I think so many of us do all we can, right? But it has felt like it hasn't been enough just yet, or it feels like whatever systems are in place that are supposed to stop it, like it takes like an unfathomable amount of energy to stop it, right? So this, of course, and I don't know if anyone else gets depressed around their birthdays. Maybe I'm the only one. Okay, so I was already naturally primed for that, but then I was also just sort of thinking through like the state of our world and just feeling as a mother, caring for children, I couldn't imagine having to. It's my worst nightmare to lose a child, to lose one of my children. And it would also be my worst nightmare to die and not know what would happen to my children. Like, so it's both of those together. And in hearing so many stories and seeing so much of what's coming out of Palestine, that is something that is very real. Like, people are living through what is my most horrific nightmare, right? And so at the same time, I felt like it is my duty to feel that, to be vulnerable in that space, because that's the least I could do, right? That's the least I could do. But then, you can see I'm already getting, but I do recognize there's some self-care that you need as part of that. So what I try to do is I go to the ocean a lot, kind of going in, or if you don't have an ocean near you or you're able to, I think a shower and just sort of like sprinkling salt over you to cleanse yourself, helps a lot. Meditating through it to try to give yourself that space, that emotional space also helps a lot. And just always making sure that you're in touch with your own healing processes. You're in conversation with your ancestors. You're thinking through, you're also like working within communities that are also, there and focused on healing and peace, right? All of these things are so important for us as artists to always kind of do and to take care of ourselves, because we also know there's a history of so many ways in which artists have chosen the wrong ways to medicate through that process, because we feel so much, right? And it's part of the power of our work, but there's also a danger in it. Yeah, so it's so important to recognize. Yeah, mahalo nui for that brilliant question. Yeah, mahalo. Free book. Yeah. Mahalo. Yeah, I was being sneaky in that way too. Yeah, mahalo. Yeah, mahalo. Mahalo. Yeah, that's what I was really hoping to do here. Well, I mean, I think of aloha as something that's limitless. There's no way that you can put a cap on aloha. It's just it's that, like I envision just sort of like aloha blanketing everything, and that's what we really need, right? But I wanted to really show today by showing more of our community and the ways in which, even though, I'm up here talking about this and it's, a project that I, was asked to speak about of my own, I really wanted to show that there's a way in which so many folks in our community are also really focused on that, that really important work. And that we're all in conversation with each other and with our kupuna, with our ancestors, and then also with so many other peoples in the world, right? And it's so important to have that kind of like artistic community that's there, recognizing each other, getting together, and supporting each other, and then amplifying each other's voices through that is also so important, right? Because I feel like, the people of Palestine, they're doing all they can to share as much as they can, even kind of facing the most dire of circumstances, right? But what else? What is our kuleana based on that too, right? But also just to even find who are the people who aren't able to get out like anything to us too. So thinking of all of the violence that people face throughout the world, fighting over, capitalist systems and profit and land and, there's so much, right? There's so much work to do that we really need a motherly influence, a manawahine, influence, but also I think a manamahu influence that is really kind of open to like focusing on healing and peace and finding new ways of being human that is not about all of these other systems. And I feel like I'm verging on John Lennon, you may say, but I think, but I'm not the only one. And I think that, as part of that, we really do need to evolve. And many of us have, but it's a matter of teaching others how to as well. And I feel art is such a strong kind of force to bring that about in the world. Yeah. Mahalo. Mahalo.